Italy laid the foundation for his later political and diplomatic career. He also pursued further studies in political science at the Stockholm University, broadening his academic and leadership profile. In 2007, Björklund was appointed Minister for Education, a position he held until 2014, during which time he was instrumental in reforming Sweden's educational policies. He also served as leader of the Liberal Party from 2007 to 2019. In 2020, Mrs. Björklund transitioned to diplomacy, becoming Sweden ambassador to Italy and also representing Sweden in San Marino and Albania. Throughout his career, he has seamlessly bridged the fields of defense, education, and diplomacy. He is married and has 2 children. Please join me in kindly welcoming Jan Björklund.
Grazie a tutti. Devo continuare in inglese. The big challenge for Europe is that there is a risk that we are falling behind Russian imperialism, Chinese protectionism, and a possible American isolationism. That is the 3 big challenges for us. In the short run, the most important challenge for Europe is the Russian war in Ukraine. I should say in some sort of middle term challenge is the European competitiveness, and in the long run is the climate change. Now I want to keep my introduction into these 3 themes. The Russian invasion of Ukraine was unprovoked, it is illegal, and it's unacceptable. A lot of war crimes have taken place, and those who are responsible have to be held accountable. Now, Europe, as European Union and the United States are supporting Ukraine. Russia is a big country. They have not needed support, so much support so far, but they are now more and more supported by some of the worst dictatorships in the world. North Korea, Iran, for example. And I can see that there is some sort of fatigue in Europe about this war. People are saying, okay, the war has gone on for 2.5 years. Let's now make peace. And let me give some comments on that. It's not up to us to decide if Ukraine should make peace. The Ukrainians have to take that decision themselves. But some say in the political debate, both in Italy, but also in Sweden, in all countries, some say, let's not send any military help to Ukraine because then it will become peace. And you hear it in the debate. Let's not send weapons to them. But let me underline, if we stop sending help to Ukraine, there is no guarantee for peace. The only thing which will happen is that Ukraine is not able to defend themselves. And why should Putin stop with this part of Ukraine he's occupying now if Ukraine can't defend themselves? The objective from the beginning was to take Kyiv, take the whole of Ukraine, take Kiev, and to replace the elected President Zelensky with some sort of Belarusian-style puppet. That was the aim from the beginning. And if Ukraine can't defend themselves after hundreds of thousands dead Russian soldiers, why should he stop where he is now? So my warning is that there will probably not be peace if we don't send weapons to Ukraine. The only thing which will happen is that Ukraine will lose this war. That is what will happen. And I should also say that that would be very dangerous for Europe, not only for Ukraine, but for the whole of Europe, because Putin has declared, you should always believe what people say. He has declared he want to restore the Soviet Union. But that is not about only Ukraine. It's about the Baltic countries who are now EU members and NATO members. It's about other geographical areas. He also has said that he wants to force these countries who are entered NATO after the Cold War, they should be thrown out from NATO. That's Poland. That's a lot of countries, Hungary, Czech, well, Czech Republic and Slovakia, it's Bulgaria, Romania, a lot of countries should be thrown out of NATO. He have said that. He have said that. Maybe they have not the military muscles to reach that goal in the short run, but that is the goal. And if Russia win this war, he will be encouraged to go on. Believe me, he will be encouraged. And the Western world he would look that he would see the Western world to be very weak. So it's a very tragic war, of course. It's a very everybody wants peace, but we don't want Putin to win this war, because if he wins, it will be a tragedy for Ukraine. But there is also the first time since 1940s we should accept that a country changed borders in Europe with violence. We have all signed two very important documents. The Helsinki Agreement from 1975. That was the big conference in Helsinki in Finland, where all the European countries, including US, including the then Soviet Union, signed the document where we agreed on to accept the borders between countries in Europe, not to be changed by violence. It could, of course, be changed if two countries agree on that. Czechoslovakia was divided into two countries voluntarily by the people of Czechoslovakia. But if people agree on it, of course, but not change borders by violence. Also, the Budapest Memorandum, it was called in 1990, where Russia accepted Ukraine as an independent state. So and if we start to accept countries changing borders in Europe after a war or with violence, we are in very big danger in Europe again, like we were in generations before the Second World War. Number two, competitiveness. When I was at your age, we sent from Europe a lot of foreign aid to India. They were a very poor country. There were reports on television in the telejournal every time there was people were starving, catastrophes in India. And we sent a lot of foreign aid. Today we send foreign aid to other countries in Africa and so on, but not to India anymore. Why? Because they have been a rich country today. There are still people who are very poor in India, but in general, India is now or very soon the third richest country in the world. Now that's for the country to say. There are a lot of people there, so comparing with the population, of course, they are still behind Europe, but they are really increasing their economy growth every year. And every year, some 10 million people are lifted from poverty to be more wealthy. So it's a development there which is really going on, and it's strong. It's very positive. China, we don't like the governor, how China is governed by a dictatorship. But we are happy for the people of China that they are now much more wealthy than they were one generation ago. Very good. We are happy for them. However, and they have reached this by being very competitive in their industry, in the economy, and so on. They are so competitive, so they are in many ways better than Europe today. Now, so at the same time, we're happy for them. We have also to take care of ourselves. We want your generation and the next generations to come also to be wealthy, not to be poor. We shouldn't replace those poor countries in the future. But we have to be aware that we have challenges in our economies in Europe, which are very heavy. Our economies are not doing so good as they should do. And I think that one of the reasons is that we are divided into, we have 35 countries in, well, depending on which countries you count, but 27 in EU, 8 more want to become EU members. So let's say 35 countries, except for Russia and Belarus and them. 35 countries in this geographical area. In the same area, United States is one country, China is one country, but we're 35. And we have our own, every country have their own legislation, their own system, their own routines, their own regulations for industries, for factories, for companies, for trade. And that is, so if you live in Arizona and want to invest in a company in Massachusetts, it's very easy. But if you live in Italy and want to invest in a company in Sweden or in Belgium or in Portugal, my colleague here before me, it's much more bureaucratic, it's complicated. And when you should make trade with each other, it's always very bureaucratic in Europe. And that we have to deal with this. And I think we have to cooperate more, not less, in the European Union. Those who argue that every country should take care more about themselves, put America first, or what they call it in all countries. But I think in Europe, we should cooperate more when it comes to the economy. Then we could also be more successful when it comes to our competitiveness. And it's important for jobs and welfare and wealth in the future. Number 3, climate change. I don't have to have a lesson for you about the challenges we are into, but they are, of course, very, very big. And so, first of all, you can say that Europe is better than other parts of the world. It's true. But on the other hand, you can also, when it comes to, we have come in the green transition, we have come a bit on that road, more than other parts of the world. In the more poor countries, they have coal, they have a lot of oil, and so on. We are at least beginning in the green transition in Europe. But we can't slow down. And it's about energy policy. It's about how is the electricity produced? How is our cars? What do we use for fuel for our cars? That is the important things. And let's start with this. And I'm now a little bit controversial because different countries have a different energy mix. In Italy, let me ask, how many of you are Italian? Okay, thank you. How many of you come from other countries in Europe? Okay, and thank you. And from other parts of the world? Okay. So most of you are Italians. So for example, Italy's energy supply is mostly by gas. Now, that's how the electricity produced. Before it was gas from Russia, now it's mostly gas from North Africa. Now, of course, gas from Russia and gas from North Africa is the same for the climate, but on political reasons, it's better to import it from North Africa if you should have gas. But of course, in the long run, even gas is not good for the climate. And that's the debate is going on in Italy. In Sweden, we have had the same debate, but in Sweden, we took the decision some generations ago, even before my generation, to invest a lot in nuclear power. Now, nuclear has that advantage that it produces a lot of electricity without any effect for the climate. Of course, there are other negative aspects, but there are no carbon emissions. And that's why Sweden is now a country with one of the highest living standards in Europe, but at the same time, one of the lowest emissions, polar emissions, and it's because of the nuclear power. Now, I know there is a debate on that, and I'm an ambassador in Italy. I won't intervene in the debate in Italy. I can just say that for our country, this has been a big success both for the climate and for the living standard. It's also about how our car is driven. Now, there is and of course, you know, you already, even if you don't own a car yourself, your parents might do it. So and they have been driven by petrol, by gas for generations. And now we have a transition to electric cars. Now, of course, even that is how is the electricity produced? Okay, you put a wire in the car to recharge the battery, but the electricity, if that is produced in a coal plant, like in some countries in Europe, it's not better than petrol. So of course, electrical cars is not better per se. It's better if the electricity is produced in a climate friendly way. So, and I think all car companies in Europe and in the Western world today and in the whole world, no car company are planning that for the next generation of cars should be fueled by petrol or gas. Everybody is now planning for electricity. So in the long run, we will have a big percentage of all cars fueled by electricity. But in the short run, we have to speed up that transition. And that is also up to the European Union now to set standards, to set demands. They have, and the European Union have done that, and now it's up to the countries to give incentives for people to change car. When you buy a new car, you should buy an electrical car instead of a gas car, and so on. But if it's too expensive, people won't do it. So it's up to the governments now to decide how to do that in every country. But we have to speed up the green transition. So I've started with three bullet points here. First, we have to support Ukraine. That's very important for the future of Europe. Secondly, we have to improve our competitiveness for the jobs and welfare in Europe. And number three, we have to speed up the green transition. And that is three important issues where the Swedish government put on the table in the European Union and in European cooperation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Preslava and I'm from Bulgaria. My question is with regards to what is your opinion on the group of Ukrainian refugees, that being of men of military age, and the recent request of Ukraine to bring back these men to this country, to their country, to fight in the war, as well as we know in the light of recent news that there have been some false, like fake medical statements issued to men of military age as to prove because they're fake, that they're not eligible of being in the military service. So what is your stance, given that Sweden hasn't officially made any position on the question? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm a diplomat now, not a politician. I have to think about that. So every country has their own laws. I can say in Sweden, if we have a mobilization of our military forces, a lot of young men and women have their duty to be in the military service if there should be a war or a high alert. It's illegal in Sweden to escape from that duty. So if Ukraine has the same rules, I can't say that they are wrong. I don't know all the circumstances, and you ask about fake medical, I don't know about it, but I can only say that in Sweden, if the government decides to mobilize the military defense, it's a duty, not voluntary, to participate.
So greetings, Your Excellency. Thank you for your really passionate presentation. My question is regarding your career. You mentioned, as Benedetta introduced you, she mentioned that you had an extensive career in the military, then in the political field. I actually saw on your Wikipedia page that you served as a Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden, if I'm not mistaken. That's a rather extensive and honestly impressive career before moving on to diplomacy. So my question is the following. Compared to diplomats that directly entered into the diplomatic field after going out of university, how has your previous career before becoming a diplomat affected your job and your work as a diplomat and the perception your colleagues have of you? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you can, okay. I was 25 years in top politics in Sweden. I've been an ambassador for 4 years now. There is a very big, well, there are similarities. You give speeches. That is one similar thing when you're a politician and when you're a diplomat. But then there are also differences. One difference is when you are a politician, you are supposed to have an opinion on everything every day. When you are a diplomat, you are supposed to have no opinion on anything any day. So that's the big difference. When I'm here representing the Swedish government, my personal opinion is not important in this. But of course, I agree on most of the things, so it's no problem. But now I represent my government or my country. As a politician, I represent myself or my political party, of course. So that is a big difference. That's why I have to be a little bit careful about some questions. And I am not intervening in Italian domestic politics. That's not my role here. As a politician, I could intervene in everything. Then people have to vote for me or not. It's another thing. So that is, but I think it has been very interesting to work in these different fields in my life. It's a privilege to have been in politics and now in always. I was as mentioned, I was party leader for the Liberal Party in Sweden. The Liberal Party are in Sweden, like here, are maybe the most pro-European party, and now it's a privilege to work within the European Union in a big European country with all this European cooperation. So it's a privilege. There is a
Okay.
yeah.
Now.
But,
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. My name is David Marulanda. I'm from Colombia and a global governance student also. So my question was related with the war in Ukraine, because I always listen this or hear that Europe and the West is defending Ukraine because of they want to protect the values that Europe defends and also the sovereignty of the Ukrainian state, right? But it also seems to me that there is a lot of things behind that, and that's not the only reason why they do it. For example, I see that the US has a lot of interest, economical interest on this area and also against Russia. And Europe, I see that, as you mentioned, maybe out of fear, but not out of the protection of the values that they say they represent. And following up with this question, do you really think that Russia, in the case that, let's say, gets Ukraine, will continue attacking other countries, particularly NATO members, because the consequences will be way different, I think, than attacking Ukraine? Thank you so much.
there is, of course, no 100%. Will Russia go on with other countries if they take Ukraine? It's of course not possible to, with 100% certainty, answer that question. I don't think they have the answer themselves. I believe that, yeah, I think, well, you and me we could ask the countries in Eastern Europe how they feel, and they are scared to hell, because they know what it was to be under Russian or Soviet occupation during the 20th century. And I think also that when a political leader have a big vision, in this case, Putin had the vision to restore the Soviet Union and the Eastern European Empire run from Moscow. I think a lot of us, including Sweden, including almost all, we don't believe him. It's just talk. And actually, the day before the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, most European leaders didn't believe that he should attack. And if he should attack, he should only attack some small parts in the east where they already were interfering. Now, he surprised the West with this big attack. And I think we have a big mistake we can do is to think that the rationales of the Russian president is the same as our rationales. He has other visions, other limits, these international agreements. He doesn't care to restore and he had this speech already in 2004 or 2005 when he lined out this policy. Should we believe him? Well, I don't know, but we didn't believe him when it came to Ukraine, and we were wrong because he did what he had said. And the big question is, can we take the risk? I can't say that it's 100% sure, but there is a big risk. Should we take the risk or not? And I should say, but we should not take the risk. We have to, and okay, then the other part of your question, are we defending anything else? Maybe there are some of those who are involved in this war have also other objectives. I don't know. I can say that the whole of the Eastern European countries, the Nordic countries, Sweden have always lived close to Russia and the Soviet Union. It's our enemy for hundreds of years. We are not strong in this question because of some economic interest. We are strong on this question because we have our country, my grandfather generation, the generation before, they have experienced how it could be in Europe when countries can't cooperate and can't follow principles. 50 million people died in the Second World War, tens of millions in the First World War, and you can go on and go on in the past. So we have experiences what it happens when leaders don't accept the principles of living together in this part of the world, and that is the objectives of at least my country and most of the countries.
Hello, I'm Diego Del Valle from Global Governance. I want to ask you, Karim, but we talked about that last year when you come to our university. So I switched to two other questions. And the first one is why the UE reacted to the 2008 crisis like that. I mean, the austerity measures, Greece, Italy, Spain, the peaks, etc. If was interested in granting our generation a future. And the second one is the North African countries. You say that it's better to buy gas from. You know how they are governed, and is not hypocritical with the EU values.
Yeah, to start with the second question, it's a tough question for Europe but it's a principle. If you are a democracy, what relations should you have with a dictatorship? Because Northern African countries are dictatorships, no doubt about it. What relations should you have with them? And there are, of course, a tricky choice to make. Should we say, we don't want to cooperate with you in any field because you are dictatorships? That is one choice. It's very high moral standard of that choice. However, if we do that, we know that China and Russia will be there instead of us. Or should we cooperate in a pragmatic way with them, also encourage them to develop into democracies? I think Europe, and I think you have to, in some time, you have to deal both these ways. But if democracies only can cooperate with other democracies, I think there will be two dangerous developments. That a lot of countries who are not democracies will seek support from other dictatorships, meaning China and Russia. And we already have China, big investments in African countries, and we already have the Wagner Group in some of the Saharan countries. Should we say, okay, cooperate with them instead of North Africa, instead of Europe? That is one alternative. But my alternative is that we have to, okay, they are dictatorships. We should criticize them for that. We should, when they break human rights, because they do, we have to criticize them of that and encourage them to do another way. But on the same hand, we should cooperate with them in some ways. For example, trade, because otherwise we will only strengthen other dictatorships in the world. Now that we have common interests in the Mediterranean, we can't. If we speak about the northern part of the Mediterranean are democracies, the southern part of dictatorships. But we have common questions we have to solve in common. The smuggling, these leagues of smuggling of migrants, you have to tackle together. Those who earn a lot of millions of dollars every year because they smuggle poor people over in dangerous boats over the Mediterranean. We have to cooperate on that. And also, I think it's a general interest of the Western world not to increase the Russian and China's influence in our neighborhood. That is the pragmatic answer of this question. Did you ask the same question last year? I didn't remember. Did you do that? Okay. I think you have to switch on the phone.
Okay, now? Okay. Hi, I'm Benedetta Leruzzo, and I'm also a global governance student. And my question is similar. It's also on the refugee crisis from Ukraine. Also because from what I know, Sweden, compared to other Scandinavian countries like Denmark, is much more open to immigrants. And that's why there was also a threat to Sweden in the last decades especially from Arab countries, from what I know, because it's much more open. But at this point, I want to ask, how did you manage these flows of migrants from Ukraine, if you also had it like Poland, that was the one that hosted the most of them, or if you didn't have this flow of migrants, how did you manage? Thank you.
Yes, Sweden has been very open for immigration. I think, first of all, we have to, if you look at the map, migrants from Africa and Middle East don't come to Sweden as a first choice. They come to Italy, they come to Southern Europe first, then they move to Germany and Sweden and so on. But Sweden was very open. and we had a lot of migrants, not least from the Middle East. Now, since we're a big country on the map, a very small population, 10 million, Italy has 60 million. So the government and the parliament in Sweden has now a more restrictive way of looking upon immigration. It's much more restrictive. It's almost more restrictive in all European countries today than it was in the past. But from a very open perspective, it's much more restricted today. But of course, we have all the immigrants who have already come, of course. And that has created, like in all countries, a lot of challenges with integration of those who are already in Sweden. Now, I couldn't say that the Ukrainians have been welcomed. They are more, and they are not in a big. The most Ukrainian refugees are in Poland and in the close next neighbor countries of Ukraine. But there come some, and also a lot here in Italy. But there also come some to Sweden. They are more often well educated, so it's much more easy to. They are much more easy to integrate if you have a university education or at least a upper secondary education. Those who coming from the Somalia and so on have never, almost never completed even elementary school. They can't read and so on, and they are much more difficult to integrate in the labor market and so on. So maybe it's more easy to integrate well-educated Ukrainians. But so this group has not been a challenge. But however, the big groups from Middle East has been a bit, and mostly the low-educated groups have been a challenge and is still a challenge.
Thanks. I wanted to know something more about the.
You host it a little bit closer. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to know something more about the midterm goals that you mentioned before, and you mentioned that US will probably behave in a more isolationist way in the next years, and I think, and I wanted to know if how the results of the elections will change Europeans' behaves towards US.
Yeah, that is the big question of the next 14 days, of course. What will happen in US after the election? And I suppose that the big change will come with the Trump win. Okay, if Harris win, there will be changes as well, but not so big. But the big change will come with Trump. So let's speculate a little bit on that. First of all, I want to say that Europe and Sweden and our countries, we respect, of course, the Americans have to elect their leader. So if they elect Trump, we have to cooperate with Trump and the Trump administration, of course. US is not one country among a lot of others only. US is the core of NATO. US and Europe has a very important relations also when it comes to economic ties and trade and so on. Our welfare every day in Europe is dependent on that we can export our products to US and also vice versa. So we are very important. Now, what can happen? Well, we don't know what Trump will do. We know that in an election campaign, a lot of things can be said, but what is the reality in the future? We know that when he was president last time, he tried to introduce very high tariffs. Now, of course, the rhetoric from Trump, also the Democrats discuss this, I can say, that is about China, but it will, of course, affect Europe at the same way. And of course, nobody profits from a trade war. And I think that what Trump doesn't say to his citizens now if you increase the prices by 30% of all imported goods, of course, everything in the shops for ordinary Americans will be more expensive. He doesn't say that because he pretends that, okay, that means that people will buy American stuff instead. But the reason why they're buying Chinese or European goods is that there are no products. Some of the products are produced in other countries, and everything cannot be produced in. So the prices will go up a lot. So maybe at the end of the day, he will not do what he says there. But if he does, Europe has to stand firm. And we had some sort of small trade war during the first Trump administration, and then we said, okay, then we will increase tariffs on some important products from America, and then US backed off. We don't know what will happen. I don't know. the second, of course, is the second effect of a Trump presidency is, of course, also related to the Ukraine and the NATO and security. Trump has said a lot of things during the years, which are a little bit scary, maybe sometimes for Europeans, that he will not support Ukraine or he don't care about NATO and so on. And of course, that will, if he really means that and take measures on that, it will of course change the security situation radically in Europe. And we as Europeans have to take our own responsibility very much. I think he's very right on one point. He says that America has paid for the European defense and the Europeans are not paying enough themselves. I think he is right. Europe has to pay more for the defense. And NATO have put up a goal that all countries in NATO should pay at least 2% of the GDP on military defense. Now, a lot of countries do that, but a lot of countries does not. And of course, I think that is the first thing to do here. Trump or not, Europe should pay more for our own defense. Yeah, some of the reflections on the question.
Hello, thank you. I wanted to ask you two questions. I was focusing on point number 2 that you were mentioning regarding the fact that as European countries, we should improve and enlarge its power in general. Considering the summit that is taking place now, because it's between 22 and the 24th of October, of the BRICS, with the annexation of the countries such as Egypt, Ethiopia, but Iran, Emirati Arab, Saudi Arabia, I mean, important countries to the already existent members such as Russia, China, South Africa, etc. How do you consider this summit taking place in Russia with our own personal goal to achieve for Europe a successful empowerment?
Yeah. So, yeah.
I had another question.
Okay.
So sorry.
You think the first one was not big enough? No.
Okay. And it's really just Sweden has decided not to adopt euro in 2023, considering that, right? Considering that it would have brought financial, a growth in the economy. And I wanted to do a kind of little parallel discussion with what actually happened with the Brexit of UK. I mean, UK has never adopted euro, we know this, but this.
Okay, first of all, Sweden, to understand the national choices of countries, you have to understand some of the history. Sweden didn't participate in the Second World War. Sweden didn't participate in the First World War. The attitude in Sweden, not my attitude, but the majority, was that if we don't involve ourselves too much in the affairs on the European continent, maybe we can stay out of future wars. That was why Sweden was not a member of EU before 1994. We was not, and so both the people and the government has been reluctant. So, okay, we joined the EU, but not the euro. And the euro was also, of course, that a lot, when you have a referendum, both governments, both social democratic governments and right-wing governments in Sweden wanted to join the euro, but there was a referendum, and people voted no. Why? I should say that the Swedish economy has been very successful. Some of the European countries, not to mention Italy, but other countries have a lot of economic problems. And people fear that if we as a rich country join this club of countries with problems, we will also have problems. So they voted no. I think that was myself voted yes. I was a leader of the campaign for yes, but we didn't succeed. So, but that's a reason. I think Sweden will join the euro in the future. There is no risk of a Swexit, no risk at all. And we will join the euro in due time. But yeah, that's the background. Well, BRICS. Yeah. Well, this meeting now is just a show. It's just a show. Putin wants to show that he have contacts in the world, and everybody, of course, knew from the beginning that the leader of Iran and the leader of China, that is his friends. They are only missing Kim Jong-un, I think, they're in this group. And some of the other countries are involved. Now, I heard that the Indian Prime Minister in the meeting had a strong speech that Russia should stop the war in Ukraine. So they don't agree with Putin on the wars, but they have, and there is some, of course, some anti-West feelings among a lot of countries in the world, maybe, well, mainly because of the historical past. India was a British colony, is still very sensitive to be united with the West, and so on. So but I shouldn't read this meeting in Russia now as that all these countries are supporting Russia in the war. They are not. Maybe Iran does, but most of them want Russia to stop this war because it creates a lot of problems for other countries as well, both economically, but all countries have neighbors and conflicts. And if it's legally to annex, for example, Xi Jinping in China, if it is now, you remember that when the war in Ukraine started, the small regions in eastern Ukraine declared independence some days before the war. They declared independence from Ukraine. And that's how Putin took the decision. Okay, we want to defend these independent nations. It was a show, of course. But if it's legal to declare independence, why couldn't Taiwan do the same? And Xi Jinping won't accept it. So it's a very tricky questions put on the table for some of the other countries also by the Russian behavior. So the meeting is a show. For Putin is the president of this show. It means nothing. They don't support him in the war, except for Iran. As an economy, yeah, okay, yeah, okay, as an economy, okay, I understand. Okay, let me add that of course, BRICS include some very rich countries, but also some very poor countries, and I can see no economic challenge from BRICS. There is economic challenge from China, no doubt, and from India. Not from Egypt and South Africa, no challenge at all. But I should say that what keeps these countries together in some sort to create some alternative to the West, that is political. It's not economical. They pretend it's economical, but in real, it's political. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Francesco Alessandrini, and I wanted to ask a question regarding the economic system of Sweden, and particularly such sustainable ground on which the country built its economy. I wanted to ask, since Sweden itself can be considered, I personally think, as a reference point for all European countries in terms of climate-friendly infrastructures and production of renewable energies production, I wanted to ask, are there any suggestion, personal or formal, that you could give to such European countries to reinvent their economic system in a more sustainable way? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And I think I touched it in the introduction, but I should say that the reason why Sweden has the lowest, or together with one other country, I think in Europe, the lowest carbon emission, is because of the nuclear power. That is the reason. Because a very big part of the electricity comes from nuclear power. Then we have solar and wind like everybody else, but they are increasing their part now. They have not been there historically. And we have some hydropower from the mountains like Italy has in the Alps and so on. But the most important, if we didn't have nuclear, we also have to be dependent on gas or oil or something for the electricity production, but we are not. We have nuclear now. So, but since nuclear power is very controversial in a lot of countries, in Italy, for example, it's not up to us to say, do like us. Everybody has to decide for themselves. But we continuously, I had the Swedish Minister of Climate here recently, and she met her Italian counterpart, and she told him about how we do and what is but it's not magic. We have nuclear power. That's why we have very low emissions. That is the short answer. Then, of course, we are, when it comes to car production, I think 50% of the new cars which are sold today are electric, 50%. Now in Italy, it's a very low grade, and that is, it has been subsidized by the government. It has been, I think that is, but not only. There is an attitude among people in Sweden that climate is very important. Maybe we are a little bit ahead of other countries there, but I should say the short answer is nuclear power.
Okay, so I'm Mariana Napoli, and my question was actually related to the one about energy. And I was curious about the Sweden transition to nuclear power, because in Italy, one of the main reasons why we are a bit undecided about nuclear power is that it takes 6 to 8 years to create a nuclear plant. And this is not compliant with the 2030 goals, sustainable development goals. So do you think that we are too focused on the short run, and maybe we should start thinking on the long run and long term?
I'm not giving recommendations to the Italian government. I can say what Sweden should do. Well, if the goal, the EU has set up goals for 2030 and for 2045. Now, if the goals are not supporting green transition, but instead stops green transition because the measures taken will not be finished until 2030, only in 2035. So let's not do them. I think then the goals are very unproductive. I think you have to count on 10 years or 10 or 15 years to create new power plants. But of course, the world don't stop 2030. And so we have the same debate in Sweden, because our nuclear power plants were built in the 1960s. They are old now, and the government has decided to replace them with new ones. Now, the new ones will not be finished before 2035 or 2038 or something. But nevertheless, the climate will go on after even after 2030. So, okay, this is a measure point 2030, but everything cannot be measured 2030. If you have a really, really clean energy after 2035, it's very good, and it can't be stopped just because you don't achieve it already in 2030. That's my personal opinion. But I'm not giving advice.
Hi, my name is Orko Provo. I'm also a global governance second year student. My question is, I've been thinking about these questions for a while, so I'm going to ask it straight. What motivates Swedish citizens to keep up with the taxes, to keep paying the taxes that is very high in the country? I mean, what is the motivation behind that? Because
keeping up what?
Keeping up paying the taxes that is very high. Yeah, the taxation system. Like, my question is how the taxation system works so good in Sweden. That's my question.
We have high taxes, you are right. I pay them every month. I think Italy has the same level or even a little bit higher. So there are a lot of countries in Europe who have high taxes. Now, of course, it's also dependent on if you think that you get services from the government which are of good quality or not. That is one part. Why does people pay tax? Of course, if you ask people, do you want to pay taxes or do you don't want to pay taxes? Everybody should say that I don't want to pay any tax of my money. I want my neighbors to pay, but I don't want to pay. So everybody should answer that. But people accept taxes if they get value for money. If there are good schools, good hospitals, police works very well and so on, people will accept taxes. Of course, it's it's important how you tax. What do you pay taxes on? How do you tax? And we have tried to lower the taxes on individual when you work, you have an income and pay tax. That has been lowered because we want to give incentives to people to work and to work hard and study so you can get the better paid work and so on. On the other hand, we have increased other taxes. So you pay a lot of tax when you consume, for IVA, it's called in Italy, I think, but that's higher in Sweden. So when you buy things, it's more expensive, but when you work, you pay less taxes. We have tried, but in total, I think we have high taxes, but I think it's actually the same level as of Italy.
Hello. My name is Surejan. I'm a global governance student, and we recently had a speech in our university about potential crisis of democracy, in a way that today people living in democracy are pretty pessimistic about the future. As example, 35% of American parents are not sure, only 35% of American parents think that their kids will live better than them. And in France, this number is only 9%. So it seems that people in democracies, even though it probably there's no better system than democracy, are pessimistic, and they don't think that politicians really represent them, or they manage to catch up with the time and the tendencies of the modern world. So my question is, do you think there is similar tendency among Swedish society? And if there is any challenges, how government tries to face them?
That is a very big question. And it's an international trend. It's also, we can also see it in Sweden. We have challenged. There are several questions, or at least maybe there are no answer of the question, but you can make some reflections. I think that after a period of very optimistic, the Berlin Wall fell down, the economy grew in the whole world, the poor countries get richer, and so on, and the richer country also get richer. Everybody get richer after 1990 to 2010 or something. After that, and people were very optimistic. After that, we have had the financial crisis. We have a lot of wars. We have migration crisis. The Middle East broke down. We have a lot of hope in the African Spring, but it was nothing about it. It was wars creating poverty, death, and migration crisis and everything. So after 2010, we have a number of crises: pandemic, war in Russia, war in the Middle East. So I suppose that one answer is that these attitudes, you say, reflect this change of the mood. So, and what is the answer of that? Well, it's of course to solve this crisis. Then the mood could change again. It's not easy to solve them immediately, but that's of course the answer. I could say that these people don't believe in politicians. Now, I have been a politician for 25 years. I've always heard that. Actually, those politicians who were in the 1960s heard exactly the same. I think that in a democracy, people are always a little bit critical to the government. They are a little bit, and that is a very good part of a democracy. You don't accept everything what they say. You listen and you are critical. So I think that there is no movement in Europe to replace democracy with anything else. However, people are, as you say, they're a little bit scared about circumstances around them. So that is also for Sweden to know. But the only solution in the long run is to try to work through these crises and solve them, I think.
My name is Fanny Rolandsen. I'm from Norway, and I
You are from
Norway.
I'm half Norwegian.
Oh, neighbors. And I wanted to ask a bit about when Sweden joined the EU. How has it affected the approach and the thought of the people? Are they still very negative to the EU? Are they more positive? Because Norway is not in the EU, as you know, and many people are afraid of the economic changes that it might bring, and also that we will have more career politicians that are not responding necessarily to the populations, but more to Brussels. What is your experience?
Well, first of all, I should say the reason why Norway voted no was two, oil and fish. And it was not about the politicians. That was the real reasons why they voted no. Norway is one of the richest countries in the world nowadays because of all the oil. So they don't need, Norway don't need the EU for economy. That was one reason. The other reason was that as a big fishing nation, Norwegians were afraid that the fishermen from EU should come and take up the salmon in the Norwegian Sea. I should say, little bit character, but you understand. That was otherwise it had been a yes. Of course, people opposed, but the majority voted no in Norway. In Sweden, there was another part. There were two important things in Sweden why Sweden voted yes in 1994 to join the EU. First of all, the neutrality, not participating in the world wars, was an argument not for joining EU when the EU only was a Western European club. But when the Eastern Europe also joined the EU, there was no neutrality anymore. That was the big other thing was that there was an economic crisis in Sweden at that time, and then when we joined EU, that was so okay. EU is better than what we have. The population in Sweden today are very supportive of the EU membership. However, they are reluctant when it comes to the euro because the economy is very strong. But today, Sweden, no political party, well, at least no one in the parliament, are saying that we should do a Swexit. There is no debate at all. So, yeah. And I think Norway should do the same. Okay. Yeah. Ransom. So thank you for listening to me. It was a privilege for me to address you. Thank you for listening to me.